to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller. Thankfully for the listeners, I can't do a Godzilla noise, so you were spared some horrible fucking bit.
Oh, God, I didn't even think about the fact that you might have tried that. Oh, I'm so happy.
I was rationally, thinking, how you would create that noise, and I was like, I'm not even going to pretend like I could do that.
Well, it's like guitars on tin cans. I actually looked it up before we did our original Gojira episode. It is some wild way of doing it that is not humanly reproducible, at least not without training. And I mean, I trust that you can screech. I've heard you do it many a time. But I don't trust you to do it well in a way that makes sense to any. Listen, if we had a newcomer to this episode that walked in on just you like, ah! And that was all they heard, they would have turned it off right then and there. Sorry, Nathan.
We're talking about Shin Godzilla this week, folks.
We are. Our third Godzilla movie we're talking about on the podcast, I believe.
Yes.
Because we talked about King of Monsters was the one that we released in America in 2017.
Yeah.
Or War of Monsters, one or the other. Whatever.
American version 3.0, I guess. 2.5, because there's technically fucking Roland Emmerich. We didn't talk about the Roland Emmerich. No, we didn't. We talked about Independence Day.
I say we keep dancing around the Roland Emmerich one. We might need to do the Roland Emmerich one here at some point.
That'd be decent memes. Maybe we could do a Roland Emmerich 2014 double episode, because I still am curious to watch 2014. I still haven't seen it.
I still really liked it. I don't know how much it would have held up at this point with my, as I've touted many a time, newfound media literacy.
with our big brain enlightened, horse cast 4 years on mine.
Which we're going to talk about my media literacy on this one a little bit, because, boy, I felt like a dum-dum in our pre-discussion, and we'll get into why in a bit here. But I remember thinking that if nothing else, the 2014 Godzilla movie was visually really stunning and great to watch in that regard. So whether it holds up from a thematic and storytelling point of view is yet to be seen. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Shin Godzilla, the 2019 movie straight out of Japan. Japan's first big Godzilla movie in quite a long time, actually.
I don't remember exactly what the last one was. Is it the first one since Final Wars in 2004? Maybe not.
It's been a nice chunk of change in between them. But this is from the director of Neon Genesis Evangelion, whose last name I know is Anno, but I can't remember their first name.
Hideaki Anno.
I have not seen Neon Genesis Evangelion, so I don't have really that great of a point of reference for what we're getting into with this. But I have seen Shin Godzilla before. In fact, before we talked about our War/King of the Monsters episode, again, don't remember what that movie is called.
The one with the global warming scene. That's the important thing.
I don't think about that movie outside of that scene ever, because it was a bad Godzilla movie. But this is just to say that, Jackson, you're the neophyte. Tell us about Shin Godzilla.
All right. This is a spicy one. So for some context, for some overall context, because I do think context is informing my point of view on this. As previously mentioned, every Godzilla movie I've ever seen, we've talked about on the show. I've only seen the Hollywood sequel. For extension quarantine classics, we did Godzilla, 54, which was great. And now we're doing Shin Godzilla, which I requested that we do precisely because it was directed by Hideaki Anno. I am not super familiar with his broader body of work. He's done more than just Eva. Gunbuster, Diebuster is pretty popular in weeb circles. A couple other live action movies. He's got a pretty long and illustrious career, in addition to Ava. But I do love me some Ava. So, obviously, Ava's, honestly, I think, one of the greatest shows of all time. I'm comfortable saying that. One of the most important ones, at least. And Godzilla is cool. I do like Godzilla, even though I'm most famous at this point for clowning on the global warming scene. I particularly did enjoy the original quite a bit and appreciated, that it's both like a goofy, schlocky clown monster movie with, some thoughtful themes. I am a Metal Gear fan after all. That's kind of my bread and butter. So, what could go wrong? We have to watch Shin Godzilla. It's hard to describe what exactly rubbed me the wrong way about Shin Godzilla without a lot of clarification, because I do think that this movie is strong in a lot of ways. Maybe a little too strong in some regards.
Hey-oh, foreshadowing.
Yeah, foreshadowing. Haha. But yeah, so visually, the movie's very strong. There's some, cool ideas. Godzilla in this one is like a weird evolving larva boy that evolves into the more traditional Godzilla. That's a neat idea. I mean, the destruction was just spectacular. Like visually, there was some cool stuff. I really like that. It is kind of a modern take on, Godzilla 54. It's not about Godzilla, duking it out with like King Ghidorah or Gamera or Mothra or whatever. And it's just, humans reacting to Godzilla. That's all great. But this movie is a very political satire, very outwardly so, and in some ways I think that works, and in some ways I think that's funny. It's very Japanese. This might be like this is arguably the first movie that we've watched on the show that it might be difficult for an American audience without sort of the knowledge of what's going on with Japan culturally to I'd say appreciate the movie, but there are elements of the movie to appreciate without that knowledge. But to see the, I don't want to say see the full picture, because that's just as true as a lot of the other movies. It's very ingrained in Japanese culture, is what I'm getting at. I'd say more so than a lot of the other stuff we've talked about that is Japanese. And as someone who is by no means an expert, but knows at least a little bit about the Japanese political situation, and sort of the implications for the political situation in the world, broadly speaking, I found Shin Godzilla's politics very troubling, to say the least. I might even go so far as to say disgusting. I had a very strong reaction to the movie, not in a good way for the most part. It was sort of like a slow burn that early on in the movie. I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt because it is the director of Eva and see where it goes. But by the end scene, I was not pleased. And then I went and I did more reading about the Abe administration, and I was even more not pleased about that. So, I mean, we've talked about me being ideologically opposed to movies in the past, but when we've talked about it before, usually it's been Kubo, right? Where it's not that important. Where it's Kubo thinks that storytelling is a way to make people immortal, and I think I reject that characterization, but it doesn't really fucking matter, right? I wouldn't call Kubo toxic. I do think the politics of this movie are kind of toxic, and I think for what it's worth, a lot of that's going to be lost on an American audience who don't really I wouldn't expect to have the context of the internal issues of Japanese politics. But when you're aware of those issues, once you see it, it's hard to unsee. And that's without going into the specific nitty gritties of the Japanese political situation and spoilers and all that shit. I mean, that's about, I think, all that I could say. A unique, strong monster movie that ideologically I'm very opposed to.
So, in summary, I'm a very special boy who knows very smart things about Japan, and I didn't like this movie. But I'm not going to go into specifics on that for 7 full minutes. Is that what I'm getting at here? Is that what we're approaching?
We are in the pre-spoilers discussion, to be fair. I could front load it if you'd like. I wanted to give you a chance to speak.
I was more so just making fun of the fact that you basically prefaced and ended this whole thing by being like, oh, I'm not going to get too far into it, and then talked for 7 minutes straight about it. Yeah. Which is just funny in a very ironic sense.
And very on brand for me, the king of bloviating.
But it's okay. That's why you're on the podcast, because the antithesis of that is me, the king of being like, hey, you know what, Shin Godzilla? I didn't really understand the Japanese political climate side of things, and I thought it was a pretty decent movie.
There you go.
Not to get into too much detail, though, mind you. I realized that was a little bit long-winded on my part. I could have just said, it was fine and moved on with my life, but I felt like I need to include a little bit of rationale behind it. So I added an extra 8 words to it to make sure that you understood my point of view.
Sean, I really don't appreciate this smear on my character. Oh, but I actually really appreciate it.
Unironically further elucidate the point that I am getting at, and more kind of explore the idea of why my media literacy brain is in fact very, very small. Mostly stems from the fact that I did not pick up on the political climate of the whole movie, and I did actually genuinely like it quite a bit. I think that the way it is structured as a Godzilla movie is very different from other Godzilla movies, in that it doesn't really focus on Godzilla so much as it does focus around the political climate surrounding a Godzilla attack, and clearly has a lot to say on it. And I think I found that to be particularly fascinating, especially in light of the fact that, there's a health crisis going on around the world that I might not agree with the United States' response to it over the past year. Considering it maybe a bit lackluster and slow on the uptake, there might be some parallels between the movie and that. And so I was focusing on this from a very America-centric point of view, because I am a filthy American who only understands things from the American point of view. So I was not looking beyond that, and so maybe missed some of the bigger, more problematic elements within the movie vis-a-vis fascism. But to be fair, doing some reading, it does seem like you have to be a little bit more in touch with Japanese socio-political climate to get into that. And I am just not. So I'm gonna kind of excuse myself, but at the same time, that feels like a cop-out. So flagellate me anyway.
I'll 100% excuse you. I'm a guy. I follow the NHK on Twitter. I keep up with this stuff. Speaking of fucking coronavirus, the whole reason we're here right now and I'm not in Japan is because of the health situation. I've had to just for my own personal life, I've had to, take a look at what the Japanese government's doing and overall what their policies are sort of like, because it actually does have a pretty direct impact on me. I don't blame you or your average Godzilla fan or your average Ava fan who sees that it's the same director and comes to watch it and doesn't know the ins and outs on the Abe administration's position on the Japanese self-defense force, right? I think that's completely fair. And I also think it's completely fair to still enjoy the movie. I mean, there is a lot to like about it. I think, as you say, I totally agree. I think that the movie is interested, despite my bigger concerns. I think the movie is still interested in satirizing sort of poor disaster responses, and there is a lot of funny stuff in there, and there is some pointed stuff that works. And I think that's okay. I'm about to say some very harsh, mean things about Shin Godzilla, but that's not to say that I'm here to say harsh, mean things about people who enjoyed Shin Godzilla. Media is not linear like that. I mean, one thing, I'm going to be comparing this to Die Hard and sort of figuring out my own like where like maybe I draw the line personally, like why this bothered me so much more than that did, because for our longtime listeners, if you recall from way back in our Die Hard episode, I basically accused that movie of being fascist, which I will be doing to Shin Godzilla, spoilers. And, you know, I haven't seen Die Hard in a while, and my understanding of what fascism has evolved, so I don't know, just thinking about the movie, I don't know if I still agree with that characterization. But I still would maintain that when it comes to Die Hard, like, that movie has some authoritarian leanings, and yet I love that movie. Like, I didn't just enjoy that movie, I enjoyed that movie a lot. So, again, you know, just because I'm here to tell you that I think the thing is problematic, and I do, I don't think you, dear listener, or you, dear Sean, are problematic for enjoying the thing.
Me?
Yes, you!
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way because people thought what I said about the fucking global warming scene was spicy and they haven't seen anything yet.
But I guess this leads us to the big question, because we know that Jackson has just some spicy shit to say. Do we want to dig into spoilers? I could probably talk about the racist criticisms the movie has without really diving into spoilers. But if you think it might be better to just call it now so we can have one long continuous discussion, I'd be okay with that as well.
No, I think, you know, to give the pre-spoiler crowd a little bit of something to chew on. I think we could start there, and then when we start brushing up on spoilers, we can move. Because yeah, I mean, it is related to the fascism right wing stuff, but it's not totally related. We have things to talk about aside from that. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
They're related, but they can also be very much independent of one another. Specifically, my part can be viewed without the lens of fascism that comes from later on in the movie. Absolutely. So let's talk about that for a minute here, because Godzilla in this movie represents the Fukushima reactor meltdown, correct? That's
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm terrible at names. This is something that should not be new to anyone who's listened to this podcast. But Godzilla is very symbolic of the Fukushima
the Thanos reactor, yes.
Fuck off! Of the Thanos reactor. He has moved from being representative of the nuclear atomic bomb to a nuclear meltdown reactor. I like that. I like that transition. It feels very natural and interesting in a lot of ways. And like I intoned earlier, the movie is far more interested in dealing with the reaction to the Godzilla Fukushima crisis than what Godzilla's up to in a lot of regards. Like the American movies are very much like watch Godzilla crush buildings and then occasionally have cutaways to characters, whereas this is much more like characters with occasional cutaways to Godzilla crushing buildings, and is intentionally designed and shot and overpopulated with characters to be as confusing and basically convoluted as possible while still being a largely understandable story. I understand why people would get lost in everything going on, but if you kind of take a step back and just watch it as a thing that's unfurling in front of you, it's way easier to follow along with rather than trying to like plot the course of like a political espionage movie where you have to keep in line all these people to understand how it all comes together in the end. It's far more just about the feeling rather than the actual linear, this is what politics are. And in doing so, it does provide a very recognizable, especially in the era of COVID, visage of American politics and indeed of global politics, of slow reactions to crises that just makes them far, far worse, because in Godzilla's case, civilian casualties, in America's case, the economal. Oh no, not the economal. So it's a very interesting parallel in that regard, in that I could not shake the feeling of like, I understand why this director is so frustrated with what is happening to the country in this moment in response to the Fukushima reactor meltdown, because I am myself incredibly frustrated with what is happening in my country as we continue to go about our daily lives when we could have knocked this thing in the bud by just saying, fuck it, stay home for a month and a half, and then y'all can go out and party and do whatever you want. but instead we're like, no, go to work and sit at your desk and whatnot. In the middle of a pandemic, which is stressful and shitty. So in that regard, I think it works really well. And it was a really engaging movie to be sitting and watching and going, oh God, too real, too real, too real. But, then other things start to take hold and it loses some of its luster.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I completely agree with what Sean's saying about these parts of the movie. I think that the bureaucracy stuff, it's the sort of like perfect nexus that like there's a lot of little jokes and gags that are very like particularly aimed at like the idiosyncrasies of like Japanese political culture, but like the broad strokes are applicable enough to, anyone who's had to deal with like a poor government response to a disaster to still feel like relevant, like you're not like completely out of the loop. So like I found it very funny that it's some of my favorite scenes in the movie that actually got like an audible laugh from me were when there are lots of characters and like the first like probably half an hour of the movie is just like a bunch introducing like 30 characters, all of whom have like different cabinet positions and all of whom have to start like, being part of a committee, and like they'll be in the middle of a meeting, right? Like it'll start like any other scene and the prime minister will be like, all right, like we have the information, let's talk about this. And then they like get up and move to another room to officially start like the Godzilla response committee because they were in the wrong committee room before. Like that's very obviously particularly Japanese, right? But like that's that idea that like there's some failing on the part of your government that's keeping you from properly addressing a crisis, that's more universal.
Yeah, it's very akin for the American audience to something like a filibuster, just to, I don't know, drop that out here like it's not in the news at all right now, where you're like, oh, we could have something solved here, but for whatever reason, we're letting this happen when we could expedite by not moving rooms or not having a filibuster in the middle of whatever the fuck is going on at any given moment. And to the movie's credit as well, it does do a really good job of making you understand why the director was so frustrated with the Japanese government's response and why he is so frustrated with the structure of the Japanese government, because from an outsider's perspective, watching this movie, it seems like a clusterfuck that doesn't enable anything to get done. There's a couple of war room scenes that, honest to God, feel reminiscent of Dr. Strangelove in a lot of ways, where if somebody says, like, can we open fire, to the person next to them who then yells, 3 people down the table, can we open fire? And basically just relaying in that way. And that feels like the fact that that's not in Strangelove is a shock, honestly.
No, totally. And I think that for what it's worth, again, before, because the fascism cloud is looming, since we've said that word, for what it's worth, I don't think that the movie nor like people expressing problems with their government or with their culture are that necessarily makes them a fascist. In fact, I'm going to provide a little anecdote.
That technically makes both of us a fascist right now already.
Because kind of the argument, so it goes, and I'm not sure like how well this holds up to scrutiny, but I think it illustrates the point very well. So I'll introduce the argument, even though I'm not sure of its validity. But it basically goes like this: that in our capitalist, liberal democracy, which is the dominant form of government on the planet right now, that due to the failures of capitalism, the inherent contradictions in that Marxian sense, due to those things, capitalism is destined to fail, and so the actual battle that will be waged in the future is not between capitalism and socialism or capitalism and fascism, but fascism and socialism, because you can only resolve, the problems of society through one of those two ways. You can't have the capitalism middle ground any longer. You got to commit to one side or the other. Now again, I'm not sure, historically or trend wise, I'm not sure how realistic that is, but I think it is a good model for thinking about Shin Godzilla, in that essentially, a lot of the problems that we maybe see illustrated in the movie are the problems of like capitalist liberal democracy bureaucracy. And so I don't think it's an accident that people on the far left and people on the far right, even if they have very different goals, will often be trying to address the same problems. The difference is the ways fascists address problems are fucking horrible. So that's sort of the framework where I'm going to be working in to look at this. And I guess with that out of the way, maybe we want to move into spoilers.
Let's move into spoilers. Before we do, as always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. Tell a friend about us. It's the only way we grow. Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. I am tweeting out links and stuff on that, so go check that out. And next week, we're continuing this Japanese February with Perfect Blue, I think is what it's called. I might have already forgotten the name.
No, you got it.
Because I feel like Perfect Blue is also an American movie about like dolphins or something, and I second guessed myself.
It does sound like that. It is an anime. I think it's a horror movie. I actually don't know that much, but I know it's directed by a really acclaimed director, and like a lot of his movies are seen as like the highest classics anime, and I haven't watched one of them, and this is one of his more famous ones, so fuck it, we're watching Perfect Blue.
Hell yeah. But for right now, we're talking about Shin Godzilla. We're talking
Godzilla.
It's Godzilla, baby. What's going on? We're talking about Shin Godzilla. Jackson, spoil Shin Godzilla, because this is where I have less to say because I don't know Japanese shit.
All right. I guess before I spoil Shin Godzilla, like, allow me to clarify what the big issue that Shin Godzilla. Oh, well, I guess I'm not allowed. So I mean, this is going to be a lot harder, but I'll try. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, and again, I'm not claiming to be an expert on Japanese politics. I only know what I've read, which isn't a ton. So if you feel like what I'm saying is wrong, I highly encourage you to do your own research. But I only got what I got. So right now, we're coming hot off the heels of the administration of Shinzo Abe, the prime minister of the Liberal Democrat Party. Now, in Japan, the Liberal Democrat Party, contrary to what those words would mean in America, is actually the Conservative Party. And I'm not familiar with every single policy, economic or otherwise, that the Abe administration engaged in. The current prime minister is still a member of that same party, but this movie would have come out when Abe was prime minister, so I'll just keep referring to him. And I do know, however, that the big issue that the Liberal Democrat Party kind of runs on, and Abe's little pet project, is the removal of Article 9 from their constitution. And Article 9 is the one that tells Japan they can't have a real military. But I do know that the Abe administration's primary issue that they kind of ran on was the removal of Article 9 from their constitution. Now, Article 9 was the part of the Constitution that limited Japan from having a real military. They only have their self-defense force, which cannot engage in overseas action. Controversially, the Abe administration reinterpreted that rule to allow Japan to come to the aid of their allies. So, for example, if we were to, if the U.S. was to get involved in, some Middle Eastern conflict, they now have the legal right to send the JSDF, which is the Japanese Self-Defense Force. I'll be using that acronym quite a bit. They now have the right to send the JSDF over there, like to Iraq or wherever we might be. And the reason that this is, such a hot button issue is, well, it's basically the same sort of things that got Donald Trump elected. Japan, a lot of the more insecure macho fasci types in Japan feel like the country has lost its former glory, that they are cucked essentially by the American government, that they cannot exert their will upon their interests in the region, that they can't fight back against like North Korea or China or what have you. As part of this, unlike Germany, which did a lot of work with the whole never forget the whole Holocaust Nazism thing, the Abe administration in particular, but Japan broadly speaking, has had a problem with denial of its own atrocities and war crimes, particularly with regards to World War II when it comes to what they did in Korea and China back then. And essentially what we're seeing is, Fasci Japan was destroyed and rebuilt from the ground up by, the Allied powers, particularly us, the United States. And because, unlike Germany, the, Fasci tendencies never really got stomped out, they are starting back up again. And now, to clarify, I don't know enough about the Abe administration or Abe himself to comfortably say that it was like a fascist administration the way I'd say that the Trump administration certainly was. But there are a lot of parallels. The one that made my hair stand on end the most was that apparently Abe or someone in his administration had criticized the Japanese education system for teaching Japanese history masochistically, which should be very frightening if you're familiar with the 1776 Commission, which was Donald Trump's little fascist project to basically not teach slavery and gloss over America's crimes. That's a big part of any growing fascist movement. You have to have the glorious state, everything be for the glory of the state and its people. So if the state did things that were bad, well, we got to gloss over those now, don't we? So if the Abe administration, if I'm not comfortable calling it fascist, which I'm not, I don't have that sort of knowledge, I can at least be comfortable in calling it a pretty far-right ideology. Nationalistic, militaristic. We can start down some pretty bad roads, shall we say. And the Abe administration specifically endorsed Shin Godzilla and said that people responded so well to Shin Godzilla, and maybe the most frightening thing of all is that this is the most popular movie in Japan in ages. It really tapped into the cultural zeitgeist. Abe said that people love Shin Godzilla so much because it showed the honor and the glory of the JSDF, basically. I don't have the actual quote in front of me, but it was pretty close to that. And now, just because, for example, let's say Donald Trump comes out and supports a movie, Donald Trump is a moron, as all conservatives are, and therefore, it could be like a Fight Club situation, right? We have some sophisticated critique of some far-right ideologies going on here, and the ruling party is opportunistically endorsing the movie in order to bolster their own power. I do not think that's what's going on here. I do think that Shin Godzilla is pretty militaristic and pretty nationalistic. And it comes down to a couple of things. First is that, kind of core to this idea, and I think it's worth discussing in a bit more detail, because this is what maybe one of the things I'm talking about when I say that, one of the problems with far-right ideology is that they can often pinpoint a problem and then give the worst possible solution to it. So Shin Godzilla is very critical of the United States of America. Now, as an American, this is based. Fuck America. But
no, America's great.
I mean, there's a reason that I'm trying to escape America, right? And the last thing I want is for other countries to be more like us, broadly speaking. So, hating America, though, to paraphrase a streamer that I really like named Vosh, hating America, while based, is not an ideology. And that's one of the problems I think the movie has. And one of the things in broader Japanese culture that I can understand that it is a little fucked that there's, such a heavy American military presence, and that the military there causes problems for the citizens just, going about their business in Japan. Speaking of coronavirus, there was actually an incident pretty recently where, Japan had the coronavirus situation handled better. They didn't handle it that well because they too had a right-leaning person in power, which means that, it's you're going to make bad decisions. But, America did it far worse because, Donald Trump was a fascist, and that led to a lot of things. So, point being, there was a coronavirus outbreak on a American military base that got so bad that it started leaking out into the broader population. And, obviously the people were fucking pissed. They're like, oh my God, like, the Americans are sitting here, like, imposing their imperialism on us. And, we get fucking coronavirus. And it's like, yeah, that sucks. I agree. That's not right. However, just because American imperialism is a not so good thing, that does not logically follow then that means Japan should be a warmongering military nation the way that we are. Those two things are not logically connected. And that is one of the things that Shin Godzilla seems to advocate for, that, the Americans, they're always presented as controlling the main, like, she's almost presented as like a femme fatale, like the ambassador character is like, ooh, she's trying to seduce our, strong-willed, like, leader man protagonist, but like he's not falling for her like dirty tricks. He's not going to be under America's control any longer. And that's all well and good. Imperialism is bad, but why do we want to escape from America's control? To what end are we trying to go to? And that, of course, is the revocation of Article 9 and building a fucking military to go be an imperialist nation yourself. And that is bad. We don't like war. We don't like imperialism. And the reason that I'm comfortable saying that Shin Godzilla is not very critical of these ideas, of kind of these far-right ideas, is that the end of the movie, we have, it's almost shot like, it's borderline propaganda, I would say. Like, I was really disgusted by what I was seeing, honestly. We have our main character, and he makes this grand speech. It's shot like the way the First Order talks in the Star Wars movies. There's a bunch of, like, dudes, not just dudes in hazmat suits, but, like, with army helmets and, like, military gear, like, lined up, make a grand speech from our guy who's, like, bold and ambitious. He's gonna cut through the bullshit. He's gonna get it done, unilaterally. And he's making this speech about how, like, some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, basically. But no, he's like, you may die, like, trying to stop Godzilla, but it'll be an honorable death. And, like, you'll be serving our great country, and, our country's at its greatest in the field of battle. And, like, the JSDF, they don't say the JSDF, because I think in the universe, we had to actually go and rewatch the movie to see if this was supposed to be the JSDF or, like, a bunch of workers.
Not the whole movie. Don't put it like we were so devoted to solving this that we went back and watched the whole movie again. We went in and watched 30 seconds of the movie to make sure that which one of us was correct. And let me tell you, if the other one of us was correct, this episode would be a whole lot different.
So, to acknowledge it, no, Sean's right. We did only rewatch, like, that 2-minute long scene. That's important to clarify. We're not that psychotic. I'm maybe that psychotic, but Sean's here to keep me in check.
You're not the one who watched 2 different Cats movies in 2 days, all right? I don't know if that's true.
Our psychosis blends and melds into something beautiful.
It's the Akira boy. Honestly, at the end of it, it's Tetsuo from Akira.
Wonderful. But yeah, I don't know if this is specifically supposed to be the JSDF, but they are visually at least coded as a military. They are referred to as a self-defense force, whether that's, the actual JSDF or the Godzilla self-defense force. Although that there are a lot of scenes in the military failing, we still get a nice display of military might here. We still get drone strikes on Godzilla as a major part of the plan that succeeds. Yikes. And the speech, it's basically, I don't know how else to put it. Like, even if the movie's politics are, like, I wouldn't be comfortable saying that the movie is, like, a fascist movie, like Hard Stop. That was a pretty fascistic speech. Like all the tells are there, like, you know, dying honorably for your state, you know, the glory of the military being the last bastion of defense, the last fortress of our glorious culture and its people. It was not far removed, and it did not sit right with me. The movie's very uncritical, and so that's the problem, is that you can have these criticisms of, you know, an incompetent, weak government. And well, that's the other thing too. That's the other thing that didn't sit right with me. It's not just that the government is incompetent; it's that they're presented visually as very weak. Like they're like the new prime minister after the old one gets yeeted halfway through. They just bring in like the Department of Agriculture guy or something, and he just sits like slumped over in his seat. He looks like Eeyore. He's like, my ramen's soggy. Like it literally feels like the movie is saying, look at this beta cuck. Don't we need a strong leader?
Yeah, hang on. Whatever. Who fucking cares, Jackson? Just shut the fuck up. Is ramen supposed to be crunchy? Honest question.
I don't think so.
What's wrong with... I didn't understand that. Like, you're everything that you said up to this point, fuck it. Who gives a shit? It doesn't fucking matter.
These are the questions.
This is the important thing. What do you mean soggy? What did he mean by that? I genuinely don't know. Like, noodles getting soggy is what they do. That's how they become noodles and not hard little chunks of gluten.
What a, like, you know, galaxy brain thing it would be if, like, Americans have been eating Insta-ramen wrong the whole time, but in Japan, they just, like, eat it like a crunch bar.
I had people in my high school who did that, is the thing. And, like, to be fair, that's not an unheard of thing, though, is the thing. Like,
no.
It's not that weird. But, like, and if he was just doing that, I'd be like, yeah, sure. I'm behind you on that one. But, like, my man clearly put boiled water on his ramen. What are you doing? What do you mean it's soggy? Is it cereal? Is ramen cereal? Is it like milk?
Wait, I have a theory. This might actually be thematically relevant. Speaking of beta cuck, like, you know, we're the cucked nation. We're so, like, ineffectual and weak. Is the ramen soggy because it's like a flaccid noodle? Is that what it's supposed to evoke? That, like, the prime minister has a small dick and that's not good for our militaristic ideology?
I don't know.
I'm willing to admit I could be reaching, but I don't think it's completely implausible that was the intent either.
No, I mean, my gut instinct is to say, Jackson, that is, you are reaching fucking from California to Japan at this point. But the thing is that we've made enough arguments that directorial intent and what gets perceived are two different things, and the perception is just as important, that I can't just, like, dismiss it out of hand because there's a very easy argument to be made for it. So as much as I want to say, what the fuck are you smoking? I can't, because I must stick to my guns and say that, yeah, I guess the noodles represent the limp dick. But the bigger problem is still, are you then supposed to eat the noodles hard?
I actually don't know. Maybe there is, like, a popular ramen variation that's more like al dente, I guess. I don't know.
Al dente noodles are still soft, though. That's the thing.
They are, but maybe, I don't know, maybe my man just really likes his ramen al dente and, like, it's too soft now.
You know what I bet? I bet it's there's like chips and dip in that situation. You know, you take, like, a noodle and, like, you dip it into some water soup and then eat it, and there you go.
Truly, you know, these are the kind of cultural innovations that validate the resurrection of Japanese colonialism.
Fuck that. This is a cultural innovation brought to you by me, Sean McKindle. Let's goddamn go. I want payment on this one.
I gotta say, ideologically, this is incompatible with your previous shotgun fun dip strategy.
It is not. These are not fundamentally incompatible ideas. These are two ideas that belong on the dining room table together. Push this bill through.
Oh, amazing.
I'm sorry, amazing. I totally derailed your whole thing. You actually were saying good things and I was quietly listening because I don't know anything about Japan. But then as soon as you said something that I could make a joke about, I had to come in and it's my time to shine. I've been quiet for too long.
Honestly, I genuinely appreciate your cut in to make that later, because yeah, here I am. I mean, it sucks. I honestly feel a little weird saying this because it's like, oh, I'm about to move to Japan, but I think that's one of the reasons that like I get so incensed about this is that like nationalism is stupid, but like culture isn't, right? Like, you know, one of the reasons I want to go to Japan is that like there's so much like beautiful art and wonderful food and like, you know, generally like great things that I enjoy about Japan. I'm a fucking weeb, for God's sake. But
that means that by beautiful art he means big titty anime girls.
Look, I am a man of culture. I appreciate both the big titty anime girls and like, you know, really refined, dignified like architecture and the tea ceremonies and shit. I love it all. Give it to me.
The problem is that you still admitted that you're into the big-titted anime girls.
But no, in all seriousness, I think that like the nation is a useful thing insofar as that like, you know, different people and different cultures have like different ideas, and I think that could be a pretty fine thing. You know, we've all got different perspectives on stuff, and that's great.
All right, calm down with your marketplace of ideas, Shapiro. We get it.
Oh.
Again, I'm out here just ruining things. That's all I'm bringing. That's the energy I'm bringing this week, y'all. It's to come in and Jackson's like going in for that slam dunk. He's almost there. Oh, baby, it's touching the... Oh, and here comes Sean out of left field. Oh, my God, it was a flying tackle. Holy shit, there's blood everywhere. Oh, my God. Oh, no.
I mean, let's be real. The dynamic this week is that I'm the little dweeb in class who's like, you know, got glasses that are too big and don't fit right with, you know, the big old Poindexter 50 style, like that one ghost from Danny Phantom that died in the 50s. And I don't know why that's my touchstone for this. So we're moving on. Going, well, actually, here's all the stuff about like politics and history and Japanese culture. And really, like, you know, if you think about it, big titty anime girls. And Sean's here to like, you know, give me the wedgie, like, you know, say, shut up, nerd, and shove me in that locker where I belong.
You know, on a related topic, I wasn't going to bring this up a minute ago, but when you mentioned Hideaki Anno, I Googled him. And I think I would very much like to bully that man. I don't know why. I looked at him and I thought, you know, I kind of want to bully you.
And I guess, like, you know, just to finish my, you know, big old soapbox Sadie thing before I move on, because I do want to talk about Anno for a bit, because I think that's one of the other reasons. You know, I feel a little personally disappointed in Shin Godzilla for quite a few reasons. First and foremost, again, is that, like, I'm moving to Japan. I'm a big old weeb. I love Japanese culture. I love Japanese art. I love Japanese architecture. I love Japanese food. I think it's great. What's not so great is fascism. And, you know, I would kind of hope that, you know, we learn from our mistakes, but the administration, the current administration, you know, democratically elected by the people, very much does not want to learn from mistakes. And, you know, that's terrible. Fuck militarism and fuck that kind of nationalism. So that's all I got to say about that. Secondly, with regards to Hideaki Anno, it's very disappointing to me that we've basically gone full, like, Trumper boomer on him. Neon Genesis Evangelion is such an achingly human personal story. Like, Hideaki Anno is famously, you know, like, he is the kind of guy that, like, would get shoved in the locker. Like, you know, being part of that, like, otaku culture was part of like his work and his identity, especially early on when he got involved in like that, like the doujins and the fandoms. I mean, the dude's basically Hifumi from Danganronpa with talent. I guess Hifumi's technically talented because he got in the school. But point is, what Neon Genesis Evangelion is taking a lot of those old like otaku tropes and like telling this very personal story about loneliness and failure to communicate and like the pain of like growing close to other people. That's like really beautiful, and really complex and smart. And the fact that a guy who made a thing like that would go and make what like plays to me as like war propaganda, very disappointing. And lastly, and then, you know, Sean, I'll give you the last word. This is my last thing. And lastly, I'm disappointed as someone who enjoyed the original 1950s Godzilla. I mean, like, the original 50s Godzilla, I mean, that movie was made by people who like fought in a war for like a authoritarian regime, and like because they had that experience of like being exposed to like what the horrors of war and like colonialism like does to people, they came back and they made a silly monster movie into like this really thoughtful, thematically relevant, like pacifistic movie. You don't make a character like Dr. Serizawa with, you know, this sort of like rah-rah, like far-right nationalist approach. Like, you just can't do it. So like, I think obviously, like, Godzilla's meant a lot of things, and he's been serious, and he's been goofy, and he's been this, and he's been that. And while I really do, like, one of the reasons I wanted to watch this movie was precisely for that element that, like, we're taking the original, like, political, like, allegorical leanings of Godzilla and giving them, like, a modern spin. I mean, like, the fact that the modern spin he's been given is, like, pro-war, I mean, God, like, you know, the original, I don't know if he's dead, but like if he is, the guy who directed the original Godzilla is probably spinning so hard in his grave he's about to drill out of it. That's like antithetical to what makes the original such like a timeless classic. And as someone who appreciated that about the original, yeah, this sucks. I hate war. What is it good for? That's my bit. I'm done. Sean, take it away.
My final word is that at one point in the past minute or two, you said the word allegorical, and I immediately started singing Cats.
Allegorical cats? Allegorical cats.
Yeah, that's all I got. Jackson said a lot more than I really could about this movie, just because I, in general, as I said, enjoyed it from the perspective of someone watching his own government struggling against a crisis. Not dissimilar, I guess, from Godzilla, as weird as that is as a sentence to say. But from that perspective, I thought it was pretty decent. And to back up my own view on not seeing the Japanese fascism of it all, reviews for this have talked about how it definitely has those fascist trappings. But to Americans, this militaristic nationalism is really, really tame by our standards, but by Japanese standards is far and away like coming out here, I don't know, Transformers equivalencies, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's really what it boiled down to. I thought it was a decent enough movie. I had no problem with it. It was, I mean, if nothing else, competently made in a way that I very much enjoyed, and I enjoyed what they were doing with the layers of just people that you meet and half pay attention to, and then they disappear and you don't think about them again, and just getting lost in the glut of bureaucracy throughout the movie, I think is very effective in a very subtle way that put a lot of people off the movie, and I completely understand why, but I think it was kind of brilliant in that way. Too bad about everything that Jackson said.
And I think that's fair. I like, honestly, like, I've been struggling with whether or not I would recommend the movie for that reason. On the one hand, like, I personally was kind of offended by a lot of it, but on the other hand, like, I don't know if you're just like an American, you're not aware of all these subtleties, and you're just seeing a monster movie about bureaucracy. I mean, like, how toxic is that really to someone who's like not in that culture? So like, I mean, I don't know, like, I might go ahead and recommend it despite that. So
use us as your barometer. If you could follow what Jackson was saying because you knew all that, you might not like it. If you, like me, quietly listened while going, I like your words, funny magic man. You know, you might enjoy Shin Godzilla anyway. So that's the final thing on that. I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda, where I continue to be daft and don't know anything.
And I've been Jackson Keller. You can follow me on Twitter at JacksonJKeller. I'm less of a downer there than I am here, but I am more of an insufferable memester, so use caution. I've started streaming again, and I've been announcing when I will be streaming on there. So, maybe come say hi, and if you want to argue about Godzilla or Japanese culture in the Twitch chat, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. So,
my man started streaming again, a braver soul than I.
Maybe a bigger fool. We'll see how it turns out.
Follow the podcast at BADH_cast on Twitter. It just tweets out like updates and clips and funny things from episodes, so you can go check that out. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/BADHcast. Again, I don't know how it works right now. Patreon is paused because we're not doing bonus episodes right now because the podcast as a whole is in flux. So who fucking knows how that works? Thanks so much to High With You, Sir. Our theme song is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out however you can. Support their music, buy them on Bandcamp, stream them on Spotify, whatever you got to do. Also, thanks to 25 Years Later Site.com. There's a little button of us in the corner that you can go click on, but you should also hang out there because Twin Peaks month is in full swing, and if there's ever a time that 25 Years Later shines, it is Twin Peaks month, and they shine year round. So definitely stick around and read some of that shit. Next week, we're going to be talking about Perfect Blue. I think I keep confusing it with Deep Blue Sea? Deep Blue?
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
A shark movie that Sam and I watched a couple months back. It's very bad in a way that is very enjoyable, and I would recommend it, honestly, if you're looking for a bad shark movie to watch. I don't know if I'd recommend Perfect Blue yet. I haven't watched it.
I actually have no idea what Perfect Blue is even about, so I'm a little nervous now. I guess this is going to be the experience of moving to Japan. Like, I've got this beautiful idea of what Japanese movie February is going to be like, and I start with Shin Godzilla, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I have to talk about all the things about Japan politically that maybe aren't so good. Well, that's a downer. So I'm a little nervous now. I mean, this is considered a classic, so hopefully. It's more of an Akira kind of classic or a Godzilla 54 kind of classic, if you see what I'm saying. So,
well, we got two other properties coming up after it that I think we'll have a little bit of a better opinion on, or at least you will. We'll see about that last one, how I feel about it.
The last one certainly won't be as dark.
Probably not. Who knows? One of us. I didn't think that this one was going to be this dark either. But usually one of us will come here and be like, "Well, actually, this movie, this children's movie, I think has some troubling implications related to something and ruin everything." Bye.
Just shove me in the locker already.
Don't you go